stories to be told, treasures to be found, silver and gold, dollars and pounds, never worth more than the stories of a town.
In sporting terms, one event in the early 80s captured Australia's imagination like no other. A boat called Australia 2, skippered by John Bertram, designed by Ben Lexon and sponsored by Alan Bond, took on the might of the USA. In a stunning come-from-behind performance, the longest winning streak in sporting history was brought to an end. The America's Cup was lifted from the New York Yacht Club for the first time in 132 years. And it came to Fremantle. Fremantle is one of the world's most remote cities and was essentially a sleepy coastal retreat until this very winged keel and some determined individuals brought a global yacht race to its doorstep. Fremantle had just 4 years from 1983 onwards to prepare to host the world's most elite yachting community, and so began one of Australia's most ambitious makeover projects.
My impressions as a young boy growing up in Fremantle, it was quite a different place than what it is today. Fremantle was a port city, a fishing community, one that was a blue-collar worker type scenario. There's been a massive transformation since about 1983 due to the America's Cup influence, but not even the local government understood the ramifications. A sleepy town, very much in the backwaters, and all of a sudden we're on the world stage. It was an interesting time, the lead up, that sort of period from the winning of the Cup to the actual defence in '87. There was a massive flurry of development applications. One, the federal government, the state government pouring in a significant amount of money into a city that had very, very old infrastructure. There was a lot of transition of buildings, upgrading, accommodation, including buildings built specifically to house America's Cup defence and challenges.
The transformation was completed, and in 1987 the yachting world descended, with syndicates preparing here for months. Unfortunately, the remarkable achievements of 1983 weren't to be repeated in 1987. But the legacy of hosting the race meant that Freo was already a very different place. 40 years earlier, Fremantle had undergone an equally dramatic transformation under quite different circumstances. During World War II, the submarine base at Fremantle was one of the most important in the world. It was the second largest for the Allies, the largest one, of course, being at Pearl Harbor. But the submarine base here at Fremantle was a closely guarded Allied secret. Not even the local residents had an idea of its magnitude or the significant role it played during the war. Rick Tallowan served on the submarines and has lived in Fremantle ever since the mid-60s.
I joined the Royal Navy in 1940. We did a lot around the coast looking for maybe some of these junks and that type of thing that may be carrying provisions, troops, and of course looking for any warships. If you were lucky enough to see a warship, you would have a go and make sure you got a way to get back out again. We had one patrol where we were in Surabaya Harbour, on the bottom, with shipping going over the top of us, where we had gone in to do some damage, and we actually got delayed by the naval vessels coming in, and it was 2 days before we got out, and it was 2 days of horror, I can tell you. With the fall of Singapore and the retreat from the Philippines in 1942,
The strategic importance of Fremantle to the Allied command dramatically increased. Heavy artillery was brought in to strengthen the defences north of the harbour, here at Leighton Battery. This important facility and the large network of tunnels associated with it remain remarkably intact. Over 400 metres of tunnels housed ammunition magazines, rest areas, plotting rooms, first aid facilities and a workshop for two 6-inch Mark 7 coastal defence guns. The observation post. But the key to the defence of Fremantle lay some distance offshore. When the Dutch arrived on Rottnest Island way back in 1658, it wasn't tourists they encountered, but giant rats. So Rottnest Island was named. The native quokka is still recovering from this insult. Rottnest Island was being developed as a key part of Fremantle's defence as early as 1936 and quickly became known as Rottnest Island Fortress. In 1937 they closed the island to the public. It really was quite a serious military commitment. Command posts, observation towers, signal stations and barracks. At its peak, the island held up to 2,500 military personnel. There were a pair of these massive 9.2-inch guns, accompanied by another pair of 6-inch guns over at Bickley Point. These guns could fire armour-piercing shells 28 kilometres out to sea at an approaching enemy vessel, long before that vessel could threaten the port of Fremantle, which is why they were affectionately known as the gatekeeper. Military activities on Rottnest Island finished in 1945 with the end of the war, without these guns ever having fired on the enemy. In fact, the only reason they're still here today was the cost of their removal far outweighed their scrap metal value. Rottnest Island has worn many hats. During World War I, it served as an internment camp for nearly 1,000 internees, mainly Austrians and Germans. But it was the island's role as an Aboriginal prison between 1838 and 1902 which has caused the most controversy. Nearly 4,000 Aboriginal men and boys were imprisoned here during that time. The description of the conditions on the island prison ranged from wonderful by one English novelist through to appalling. Even genocide was mentioned towards the end of the tenancy of the prison on the island. I've yet to find a 19th century Australian prison that fits the description wonderful. But their building program was certainly ambitious. They were kept busy. This area is called the Quad. All the prisoners were housed in cells around the walls here, and this was their main exercise yard. Lighthouses, seawalls, and many other buildings are all testament to the hard work of 6 decades of Aboriginal prisoners. This is the Roundhouse, Fremantle's first prison. It's also Western Australia's oldest building, built in 1831. It had 8 cells around a central courtyard here. You've got to remember, Fremantle was established as a free settlement. This prison was purely for use by the local population. But the colony here was struggling. It needed a workforce, and the workforce was to be convicts. They needed their own prison, which was built right at the other end of town. This one was designed to house over 1,000 men. Its record of keeping prisoners in captivity was somewhat dubious, and one of its more celebrated occupants was a bushranger by the name of Moondine Joe.
In the Darling Ranges many years ago lived a daring outlaw by the name of Moondine Joe. He stole the squatters' horses and a sheep or 2 or 3. He loved to roam the countryside and swore he would be free. Well, the trooper said we'll catch him, but we know it's all in vain. 'Cause every time we lock him up, he breaks right out again. In he goes, and out he goes, and off again he'll go. In he goes, out he goes, and off again he'll go. There's not a jail in WA can keep in Moondine Joe. Moondine Joe. Moondine Joe.
Moondine Joe's final push for freedom ended when he was caught in the cellar of one of the local wineries. The gold rush of the 1890s cemented Fremantle's position as the gateway to Western Australia. But the rush to win this precious piece of silver elevated Fremantle to the world stage and secured its place as an Australian icon town.